Yesterday, if you remember, now we're learning a speech of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's printed in Likuti Sichot Gimel. Gimel. We started it yesterday. And these are a series of speeches, of what do you call it? Speeches, words, comments. That the Rebbe gave at his Passover Seder in 1958. If you remember what we talked about, first of all, we said that why don't we make a blessing on this is what we discussed yesterday. Why don't we make a blessing on saying the Haggadah? It's a commandment. It's a commandment to say the Haggadah. Why don't we make a blessing? So it says, because the same thing like on blessing after eating, which is also a commandment. After you eat bread, you're supposed to, it's a commandment from the Torah, one of the 613 commandments, one of the 248 positive commandments that you're supposed to bless after you eat. So it's a commandment. Why don't we make a blessing on it? Every commandment you make a blessing. It says because you don't make a blessing on a blessing. The same thing is the Haggadah of Passover. The whole Haggadah of Passover is one big blessing. Therefore, we don't make a blessing on it. That's the first thing we learned. Second thing we learned, on the second day of Passover, we should make some sort of a mention of the victory of Purim. Haman was hung on the second day of Purim, on the second day of Passover, I'm sorry. Haman was hung on the second day of Passover. So therefore, outside of Israel, it's going to be the second day is a holiday also. In Israel, there's only one day holiday, but the second day. So make a little mention that was the day that Haman was killed. Why? Why should we talk about Haman and Purim? The Passover is such a holy holiday. Why? So he said, because Purim, the whole thing of Purim is that we did it all. The Jewish people stood in self-sacrifice, it says, for one full year. That's how Chabad explains it. For one full year, and then they defeated their enemies because it was the Jewish people, they did it. So that's an arousal from below, which is not the case on Passover. God did everything. That's an arousal from above. When God does everything, so the revelation is much greater. But it's not long lasting because we weren't really partners with God when we left Egypt. And that's what happened. We saw that the Jews worshiped the golden calf and they made all sorts of troubles. Which is not the case. Purim. Purim is internalized. We did all the work. So therefore we have to unify them both. We have to both receive the tremendous blessings from God, which that's the whole thing of Passover. The whole thing is a big blessing, like we said in the first words we just finished saying. The whole Passover is a blessing. The whole Haggadah is a blessing. But we can't forget that the main thing of Judaism is the lesson we learned on Purim, self-sacrifice. And that's why it says that only on Purim, 1,000 years after the Torah was given, that the Jews really received the Torah. It says, Kimu v'kiblu. The Jewish people really fulfilled, they did the Torah that they had received 1,000 years earlier. They didn't really get the point until Purim. The point of the Torah is self-sacrifice. Easy to say, not almost impossible to do, but that's the essence of Judaism. Okay. Why is it? Okay, let's continue in the same vein. Why is it that why is it that we make a mention of Purim on the second day of Passover? Why did it happen on the second day of Passover? The Laila Passover, on the first night of Passover, Bo Eliyahu Hanavi, comes Elijah the prophet, Levaser ala Geula, to announce the redemption. Right? Redemption. The first of the 10 commandments is, I am God that took you out of Egypt. We believe that this is not just a historical statement, but this is a statement revealing the future as well. I am God that took you out of Egypt, and I'm going to do it again. This thing that I took you out of Egypt is not just a one-time thing. This is going to be again. God's going to do big miracles. Elijah the prophet, every night, every Seder night, we open the door, right? Near the end of the Haggadah, you open the door, you take a candle, you open the door, and for Elijah the prophet. It says Elijah the prophet, he announces the future redemption. That's what it says. The Maimonides says, some people say he'll be the Moshiach himself, he'll come together with Moshiach, he'll come after the Moshiach. In any case, whatever it is, on the night of Passover, Elijah the prophet comes and he announces the redemption. From this is understood, she'ikar, the main thing, she'beikar hu balel beis Pesach, the second night of Passover. Why? The second night of Passover is not done in Israel. It's only done outside of Israel, in exile. Jews are all supposed to be in Israel. The Jewish people are supposed to be in Israel. It's not going to happen until Moshiach comes. Don't listen to those people that say that it's the beginning of the redemption. The Rebbe was very against this idea that the establishment of the state of Israel was the beginning of the redemption. In a way, he said it's almost the opposite. It's up to the establishment of the state Israel, everybody agreed Israel was holy. There was a holy land, it was the promised land, and they took it over and they tried to make it mundane. Okay, let's not talk about that. But the fact is we are now in exile.
It was built up because of that. It was built up.
Please. Mm-hmm. Second day of Israel, the second day of exile, the second day of Passover is only second day of Passover because we're in exile. If there was no exile, there wouldn't be 2 days of Passover. So the second day of Passover.
Does one?
Please, let's make comments. Let make the comments, please. I'll finish the class.
I just had a question about Leo and Navi, about the Seder. Does one open the door if they're in an apartment building? If it's just to the hallway?
Everywhere. You open the door everywhere. Everywhere, open the door. Yeah.
But I can't if I can't go outside.
Unless you're in prison. If you're in prison, it's pretty hard to open the door. They might get angry at you, but if you can get them to do that, then go. You don't have to. Doesn't have to be a door to outside. You open up whatever door you have. If you can go downstairs and open the door, that's good. Okay. Or you have to open the door to let Elio and Avi in. Or the advantage of light comes from darkness specifically. So on the first night, we announce the redemption. But that means the redemption comes, it'll be here on the second night. The second night is only in the time of exile. So he says, because only through the exile can we come to the big redemption of the future. Because there's a better type of light. True light only comes from darkness. And therefore, machrichim gam maskirim. Maskirim. We mention also Purim on the second day of Passover. Why? To draw down the redemption, the future redemption, that it should be both things. Namely, that the future redemption should be, first of all, it says our work from below, and also God's revelation from above. It says Samti Kadkod Shin Shayach. It says Omer Kodesh Baruch Hu Lahavi Kadenu Kaden. It's also the same thing. It says there's a question about there was a window in the Ark of Noah, and there was a question if this window. Some people say that it was also a precious stone, and that the stone shined. It shined. It was like fluorescent, whatever it is. What is it called? Anyway, it shines on it. Says phosphorus, something like that. It shined on its own. So it says the same thing. This world, does it shine on its own? In other words, the light comes from the world, or is it that God will illuminate the world? So God said it's going to be like both. It's going to be like the first night of Passover when God announces the redemption. And it's going to be like the second, that it's going to be because of our work in exile, that we're in exile and we have to do the work. Both of them will be together. That's why we mention Purim on the second night of Passover. Purim is a holiday. We did it all ourselves, so to speak. And Pesach, God did it all to unify them both. That's going to be the future redemption. One of the main things of Moshiach is that when we have to work harder. Moshiach is going to make the Holy Temple. Holy Temple is for work. You're going to have to go up to the temple 3 times a year, and there's going to be sacrifices and etc. So we're going to have to work harder, even more. It says that when we do the commandments, then we'll really feel the commander in the commandments. That's what it means. There'll be a new Torah. New Torah. It means that we'll really feel the godliness in all the commandments. It'll be impossible for someone to stand up and say, "Oh, I've changed the law. You don't have to keep Shabbos anymore. You don't have to put on tefillin anymore." There won't be such a. Every Jew will be so happy to do the commandments. Okay. Hey Ma'anya. We said before that this is the beginning of the Haggadah of Passover. Ita b'Siddur Arizal. It says in the Siddur of the Arizal of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria that there's different opinions if you should say ha lachmanya or hey lachmanya. Hey lachmanya. What's the difference? Right? Grammatically, it's the same thing. But the Arizal says it has to be pronounced with a hey. Hey lachmanya, not ha lachmanya. Because by saying hey lachmanya, this fixes up what Yosef said. Hey lechem zera. Okay, what was Yosef? What did he say? Hey lechem zera. Yosef. You read in the Bible that Yosef was sold by his brothers into Egypt, and he was put into prison, and miraculously he got out. The king had a bad dream, and one of the king's ministers who had previously been imprisoned together with Yosef remembered that Yosef properly interpreted his dream, right? The minister of wine. So the king said, take him out. I want it. And Moses explained the dream of Paro. Explained the dream of Paro. And Paro was so happy that he made him the viceroy, the vice king. Roy is a king. Made him the king, viceroy of all of Egypt. So Yosef said to Paro, you're going to have 7 years of plenty, and 7 years are going to be famine. They're going to eat up the 7 years of plenty. Hey lechem zera, give seeds that the people can plant. It says by means of this. No, God didn't tell him to do this. He did it on his own. By this, it gave Yanika leMitzrayim. This gave an extra power to Egypt. Mira, hey lachma'anya, but when we say hey lachma'anya, the same pronunciation, hey, the taknim says we fix this up. Look, and therefore we have to say hey lachma'anya with a tseri. Tseri is a 2 dots, like hey lechem zera. But the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe said that his father, the Rashab, he most of the time he would say with a tseri, he would say hey lachmanya. But once in a while, once in a while, he would say ha lachmanya. He would also say ha lachmanya. The Yosef, that he would say hey lachmanya. That's the thing of Yosef, but sometimes he would say ha lachmanya with a comets. No comets. Okay, all of the punctuation in the Hebrew letters. These are also corresponding to the sfirot. They also correspond to the sfirot. Let's see if we can have a little picture over here. See, here we go. Here are the punctuation marks, right? So some say that this is like, this is keter, chachma, bina. Anyway, there's ways of unit. I used to know this once. The Rebbe even said that we should arrange this in a different way. Okay, so anyway, this corresponds to the 10 sfirot, right? 10 sfirot. Here we go. Right? Keter, I think Chachma, Bina, Dat, and the emotions. It works out. So here we go. And that corresponds to Keter. Now, just a very basic thing. There's a lot of Kabbalistic books in Judaism. Chabad Hasidus explains a very small, a very percentage of the terms of Kabbalah. A lot of the terms of Kabbalah, and sometimes they're mentioned very just in passing, but it's very complicated. Kabbalah is very, very complicated. Maybe we can even say that Kabbalah is something like a professor in anatomy. A professor in anatomy, and Chabad is like first aid. Chabad is first aid. Chabad is to save the Jewish people, right? It's emergency service to save the Jewish people. So in order to be a medic or the first thing, you have to know basically how the human body works, but you don't have to know all the corpuscles and all of the veins and all the details, the little tiny details. Well, that's the same thing about the creation of the world. The world, spiritual worlds are very complicated and they're very vital. It's very necessary, right? All of the different aspects, like a human being. The smallest corpuscle, whatever, in your toe can affect the highest aspect of your brain, right? Your toenail, whatever, can affect the highest aspects of your soul. You have an ingrown toenail or something that hurts, so you can't think properly. So all the details are really tremendously important. They're important. They're vital. But in order to keep Judaism alive and well, you have to have first aid. And the first aid, so he explains certain things. So here we're talking about, but the Rebbes, they knew all the secrets. They knew all of the Kabbalah. There's also some Hasidim also that are very, very well versed in Kabbalah.
Rabbi, I'm not understanding what the concept when you mean of first aid and
I'm not finished. Not finished. Okay. So
the previous Rebbe, he had speech impediment and other
please,
suffering.
Menachem, please. We'll do this after the class, because if we were sitting in a classroom and I could see everyone, then that would be good. But no, it's right. If maybe we can have screens that everyone could talk. But if people talk in the middle, so it just it's disturbing. Okay. I promise you, after we finish the class, there'll be time for everybody to ask questions. Okay, including you. Okay, please. It says sometimes the Rebbe Rashab, he would say ha lachem zera, which that refers to keter. And he would say ha, the hey, even though that it's a very light word. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, what am I trying to say? The purpose of Chabad is to keep Judaism alive, to keep Judaism to do what it has to be done in order to love God, in order to fear God, in order to have faith in God. All the terms in Kabbalah which are necessary for that are used in Hasidut Chabad. Rarely are like the letters explain the difference between the Kabbalistic level of the letters and the Kabbalistic level of the different punctuation marks. Very rarely are talked about those things. And there's also different things, partsufim, the eyes of God, the nose of God, these are not talked about in Chabad, right? But the Rebbes knew all this, and they knew sometimes the importance, some things that only the Rebbes could do. And so therefore, when the Rebbe would do something, it would have a great effect on the world. Now, the world is very complicated, like we said, and the spiritual worlds are very complicated. The exile has concealed all this. So it takes a lot of work. We've been working for 2,000 years in order to make the Jewish people healthy and alive. And sometimes it requires the inner Kabbalistic knowledge of this. And that's what the Rebbe did over here. Instead of saying, hey lachmanya, which that refers to the level of bina, let's say, or chachma, so that he would use the word ha lachmanya, but ha, that's a higher aspect of God, which is keter. Okay, and he would stress the hey lachmanya. Hey is a light letter. What's the explanation? What are we talking about over here? The inyan of birurim, when we're talking about refining the world, that's why we're here, is to refine and to clarify the world. So we see that God is creating the world. There's two ways of doing this. Getting things in order, like we said, organizing the puzzle of this world, putting it together so we see sense, we make sense out of the world. The world becomes, we see that it's the creation of God. There's two ways of doing it. Number one, b'derech hislabshus, in a way that we get into the world, she'amaborech tzorech litlabesh b'levushi amitbarer, that we get involved in the world. One way of refining the world is getting involved in the world. You have a job, you have a family, you have friends, you make money, you're involved in the world, right? But you use the world the way God wants you to use the world. That's one way of doing it, refining the world. There's another way, which is called derech memela, automatically. Mitzad gilui or naile, a revelation of God from above. A revelation of God from above. Just one moment, please. One moment. Okay. So there's two ways of refining the world. One way is how we do it, and we're involved in the world and we use the world properly. And another way is where we're also supposed to do, but this is more what the Rebbe's do, and a mimela, revealing God from above, bringing blessings into the world from outside. Something like how the Jews left Egypt. Kamo, like in the days of King Solomon. The Kaimus Yarda Musa says in the days of King Solomon that the moon was full. What does it mean the moon was full? The moon is the receiver. The moon also represents this world we receive from God. In this case, the metaphor is the sun. When it says the moon was full, it means that this world was full. Sha'az then had Bia Malka Shva. It says that the queen of Shiva, she came herself at the Nitzutzos, the sparks of Ethiopia, wherever she was, into Shva, wherever Shva is. She brought the sparks to King Solomon. And what does it mean? King Solomon was so great and he was so holy that he drew all of the world to him. The people came to him and said, please give me advice. How can I arrange? What should I do? What does God want me to do? So King Solomon was so holy, his holiness fixed up the world. That was like an automatic way. So that's two ways of refining the world, either being in the world like we are in exile and fixing up the world. And the other way is like King Solomon, he was in the Holy Land and he drew everything to him. Everything came automatically. According to this, now we can explain the reason why the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, the Admor Nishnu Seder, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, Rebbe Shalom Dovber, he would say sometimes, Hey Lachmanya, and sometimes he would say, Ha Lachmanya. Sometimes he would say, Ha Lachmanya with the comets. That represents this aspect of Keter, drawing down the crown of God. Because sometimes you have to have refining the world, namely Egypt, by means of revelation from above, from Keter, which is above understanding. Zeu Ayira Bezuhi Hora'ah. This is a teaching to every single Jew. What's this relevant to us? What the Rebbe Rashab did, he was a tremendous tzaddik, and he knew all the secrets. And what's this got to do with me and you? Sometimes sometimes you have to refine things in the world when you're in certain situations. You can't do it in a normal way. It has to be Gila or Naila. That's why we have the Torah. That's why we have commandments. Avek stellen zich in a hechra maimar matzav. You have to just put yourself in a higher level. And by means of this, the refinement comes in a way that's automatic. It says in chapter 24 of the Tanya that Daniel in the lion's den was not a miracle. It wasn't a miracle. And that Daniel, because that animals are naturally afraid or in awe of human beings. Animals are in awe of human beings. Human beings are made in the image of God. The animals are not in the image. Animals are animals. They're creations. Human beings are the creator, just like it was in Noah's Ark, that all the animals were quiet because there was a revelation of God in Noah's Ark. So the same thing with Daniel. Daniel was so holy that automatically the lions were quiet. It was because of his quietness. It happened automatically. Maybe you can call that a miracle. It's a miracle that someone could reach that level. But nevertheless, that's part of the way God made the world. So sometimes it also is the same thing. Sometimes when you're in a situation like King David did, right? King David, he just prayed to God for whatever reason it was, is that God wanted to continue giving King David these trials and difficulties. So it says there's two ways of refining the world. One way is don't let the world affect you negatively. You have to be a positive effect in the world. That's one way. Another way is just to completely elevate yourself from the whole situation. Just cling to God. Forget about the world totally. In Chassidus, that's called the Chatchila Ariber. That by means of this, the preparation is made automatically. The saying of the Rebbe, the Marash. Oh, here it says. That's what I'm saying here. That's what I just finished saying. The Rebbe Marash, the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, said that the world says that Miken nit arunter darfman ariber. If you can't go through a problem, then you have to jump over it, right? Sometimes you get into a problem and you can't deal with it, so you try and it doesn't work. Then you say, okay, I'll throw myself on Hashem. I'll jump over. I'll ignore the problem totally and just do what God wants, right? You have to try normally, and then the Rebbe said that's what everybody says. I say I hold as mitarf lecharchila riber. That's how you should do it from the beginning. Jump over your problems. Deal with the way as though they didn't exist. Think in terms of what God wants, and then things will be, how do you say, will take care of themselves. Will take care of themselves. You have to learn how to do this. You can't just ignore all your problems. You have a debts or something. You say, ignore it. You have to do it. But this takes thinking and planning and direction on how to do it. But nevertheless, it's the things should be done. God helps, and God, if we throw ourselves on God, God definitely does help. He will definitely take us out of Egypt. And now we'll do one more. Let's do the Yom Yom, and then we will take questions.